There you go, Hannah. We're recording.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This. I see a lot of people on my screen. Oh, damn, look at all that. Oh, there's some people that are really small now. All right, so good evening, welcome. Chapter 8, Pathophysiology. So we learned in the last chapter about the human body, and we talked about a little bit how it works. Now, pathophysiology is the study of the disease process. And so we start looking at the abnormal part of the human body. And we talked a little bit about the normal, and we talked a little bit about the abnormal. Or we talked a lot about the normal. Now we're going to get a little bit more into the abnormal part of the human body. Now, at the EMT level, they really concentrate on metabolism and perfusion. And we started talking a little bit about metabolism the other day, creating energy. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So with pathophysiology, we got to understand how we create energy and what happens when something is inhibiting the body's ability to create energy. There's two ways we do that. Through glucose and oxygen. If we're not eating or we have an issue with sugar like diabetes, we'll have an issue getting that sugar. This will concentrate more on the perfusion part, which is the oxygen delivery to the tissues themselves. So there are things that could interfere with that. So we have Breeza and we have Gabe. They're on the scene of a 52-year-old man who's complaining of difficulty breathing. The patient is breathing shallowly and rapidly. He gasps, "Need help, can't breathe." Does that sound normal to you? No. So obviously, just by us getting there and him saying that tells us he's having an issue. So going back to last week, what purpose does breathing serve? Don't everybody answer once. I can't make it out.
To remove waste from the body?
Okay, it helps remove waste. And I hear the doggy tell me other things.
Don't you need oxygen to metabolize?
Correct. So you could say that breathing, or purpose of breathing is to help create energy. Okay, yes. But how is that done? Now, I'm not talking about the Krebs cycle. I'm not talking about creating that energy. I'm talking about how is that energy created? I should rephrase that. What's needed in order to help create that energy?
Isn't it by burning sugar?
Yeah.
Okay, burn sugar. But what other ingredient is needed in order to burn that sugar?
ATP?
No, that's a byproduct of creating energy. What was that? What's the main thing we get when we breathe?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. So the main purpose of breathing is to bring in oxygen to the body. And the secondary is it helps expel the waste, carbon dioxide. So in what ways does a problem with breathing affect the body?
Not getting rid of the bad stuff?
Okay, you're not eliminating the carbon dioxide, which we'll find out that it helps create an acidic state in the body. What else?
And lack of oxygen.
Okay, and how is that creating a problem? Not enough oxygen causes what?
Anaerobic
just-
metabolism,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, it's going to create, or it's going to switch to anaerobic metabolism.
which doesn't create enough energy.
Correct. So you're basically having a problem with breathing is not breathing in enough, bringing in enough oxygen, which in turn causes a body to switch to anaerobic metabolism, which causes a decrease in production of ATPs, adenosine triphosphate. I know you guys are like, whoa, wait, what? But trust me. Okay. So and the other thing is it doesn't bring in enough oxygen to the tissue, to the cells, which again, they're going to create energy. Okay. So I can't catch my breath. I don't have enough oxygen to allow for normal cell function. I know we need water. Okay. But besides water, the most important things that we need are sugar and oxygen. In order to break down the sugar, because that's what the body eventually gets. It gets it out of the carbohydrates. It goes through a process, and it also throws in the oxygen there to help burn up that glucose. In turn, it creates energy so the cells are able to function. That's why when someone dies, there's no more oxygen, the cells die. Because there was no cell function going on because they died. And we'll talk about how that exactly happens. But we need the cells to be working, to create energy, to be able to move. Now, if there's an illness that's preventing the delivery of oxygen and glucose, injuries and illnesses can prevent the oxygen from being delivered, as well as the glucose, but also getting rid of the wastes. The main waste the body gets rid of, I'll introduce it, is what? We breathe it out.
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide.
Get rid of the carbon dioxide. So guess what we get to do as EMTs? We make sure that the person can keep going. We give them some O2, some oxygen, some O's. We can maybe give them some glucose, depending on if they're awake or not. But we could do something to help our patients out. We love that part. Flashback. Remind me of when I
Someone's in
was
trouble.
in trouble. Huh?
Yeah.
Someone's in trouble.
Yeah, not me. At least I don't think it's me. I didn't hear my name. I didn't hear somebody say, Luis Miguel, pórtate bien.
Luis Miguel.
Hey. Remember, I control your grades. Okay. So cellular metabolism. Glucose goes into the cells, and in which part of the cell is energy produced? They call them the powerhouse of the cell.
Mitochondria.
In the mitochondria, good. In the mitochondria, the energy is produced. So you got glucose, and we breathe in oxygen, and the process again is called aerobic metabolism because we are using oxygen. If there's not any oxygen or decreased oxygen, what kind of metabolism do we have then?
Anaerobic.
Aerobic.
Anaerobic metabolism. Okay. So aerobic with oxygen, and aerobic, and absent or without, and aerobic is no oxygen. Now, metabolism in general, doesn't matter if it's aerobic or anaerobic, does produce a couple ATP molecules, about 2. So we need to create a lot more than that. That's not going to be sufficient. And so we get that sugar, we get that oxygen, we get 36 ATPs of energy, or 36 ATP molecules. In order for us to cause muscular contractions, for us to move nerve impulses down the line, for us to maintain a good chemical balance inside our bodies, we need those ATPs. Function. Without those ATPs, those nerve impulses are not moving very fast. So we need that oxygen. So here's what it looks like. There's the cell. You got all that junk in the cell. There's the mitochondria. Throw glucose in the cell, throw oxygen in the cell, goes into the mitochondria, Krebs cycle. Don't worry about Krebs cycle, but it's a Krebs cycle. Breaks it down, and we get ATPs. And we're happy. Happy as a clam. A weird ass light sometimes. Glycolysis is a process of breaking down sugars. So that in itself creates just a little bit of ATP. The rest is done with aerobic metabolism. Now, Ricardo, what'd you have for lunch?
I'm having Chinese.
Okay, so you're having Chinese right now. Okay.
Yes.
So right now you're digesting it, and your body's going to be getting out the sugars that it needs. However, does the body absorb everything that you eat?
Yes. No.
No.
No. There's going to be things that you don't need. And we know this because in about 16 hours, you're going to be sitting somewhere,
Possibly.
looking at Facebook, reading what's going on in the sports world. Hopefully nothing more than that. And then you're going to do something, and then you're going to hit a flush button, and you'll forget about what you just had for lunch/dinner right now, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what was it that you eliminated, without getting graphic? What was it that you eliminated 16 hours from now? See, Paula knows. I can tell by the smile on her face.
The chocolate ice cream emoji.
It's what mothers have to do to their kids when they're babies, like every 3 hours. Yeah, Jesse's still doing it. Thankfully, the babies ones don't smell like some ladies. Hey, I told the morning class today's Pick on Wives Day. Okay, wives and girlfriends. How's that, Sharon?
I mean, I guess.
Don't worry, I rag on guys all the time, but today I just thought it would be the Wives and Girlfriends Day. So you go poop, right?
Yes.
You have a bowel movement in about 16 hours. What was in that poop? I'm sorry, bowel movement. Let me be professional here. As I've ate.
I poop. Well, my
Anybody
Chinese
what's in that poop? Huh?
It's waste.
are waste.
Yeah, it's a waste product. Speaking of waste products. Okay. So it was poop. All right. So now, in metabolism, either aerobic or anaerobic, we also have waste products. We don't burn everything, just like when you, let's see, I'll pick on Paula now. So Paula, have you ever been camping or to the beach and you set up a campfire? Some of you have. Did that wood fully burn and left with nothing? Didn't you have a pile of ash? And sometimes the wood didn't burn all the way through.
What?
It was waste product. Not everything was used up. Whoa, extreme close up. So what are the waste products that result from metabolism?
What's he done?
In this case, aerobic metabolism. What was that? What were those waste products? Here's a hint. Or not that one. So what are the waste products as a result of aerobic metabolism?
Heat, carbon dioxide, and water.
Heat, carbon dioxide, and water. How do we know there's heat being produced?
You're sweating?
Yeah.
Not necessarily, because as you sit right there, you're sweaty.
A little bit.
What are you doing to be sweaty? Do I make you that nervous?
Because you have a resting body temperature.
Correct. And what's that normal resting body temperature?
98 degrees, right?
98.6.
98.6.
98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. What happens to a person with what happens to a person's body temperature when they die?
Goes
Drops.
down.
Drops. Why?
Then no more heat.
There's no more
Heat
heat
produced.
production. There's no more heat production. All right, carbon dioxide, or let me go back to carbon dioxide. Water. What does the body do with water?
Filters it.
Okay, it kind of filters it, and then what else does it do?
Gets rid of it.
That expels what it doesn't.
Some of it is gotten rid of through urine, but the other part, excuse me, the other part is reabsorbed into the body. Because aren't we made up of 70% water?
Yes.
Okay, so the body reabsorbs that water. So it's taking care of it. And the last thing it does, or it creates, is carbon dioxide. Well, what do we do with carbon dioxide?
We exhale it.
We exhale it. The body does not like carbon dioxide. Now, before I show the screen again, I was talking about this on Friday. No, on Wednesday. We have a process called, or not a process, but we have a thing, the body has a thing called homeostasis. And I'd mentioned to you how homeostasis is a state of equilibrium. And remember I mentioned about babies clinging to mom? Because that's where they feel the safest. Do they act the same way with dad? They don't, do they? It's all about mom. Ah, thankfully. Just kidding. Thought that was my phone ringing. So think about the body wanting to be in that safe state. Or as I also mentioned to you, Happy Gilmore, where Happy Gilmore's telling the dog, go to your happy place. Well, the body wants to be in that happy place. And the body's going to do what it can to take care of itself to be able to go back to its happy place or try to achieve homeostasis again. It doesn't like deviations. Okay? So understand homeostasis. The body's going to do what it can to take care of itself. That's very, very important to remember as we start talking about different things. That's why we start seeing the changes. It's the body's ability to take care of itself. Now, the other point here is that the majority of the ATP that is created, and ATPs are just molecules. Although your book has a diagram of it. But let me real quick, like, and I lost my marker. Gosh darn it. Oh, there it is. All right. Oh, you can't see my whiteboard on this background. Okay. All right. ATP, adenosine tri un de trois. 3, adenosine triphosphate. And so what it does is it helps with the sodium potassium pump. I feel for you guys because I didn't learn about the sodium potassium pump until I got to paramedic school. Now we're teaching this in EMT school. My goodness, that's a lot. No, I don't want to scare you. We'll talk about the sodium potassium pump. I promise. And I promise not to get mad at Vanessa. Here's how it works.
Is this the same as dehydration and hydration?
No, that's more of a volume levels in the body. Although the sodium potassium pump also helps regulate fluid levels. So let me talk about that real quick. What the cell is trying to do is it's trying to maintain the water balance within the cell because of the cytoplasm, the gel, the gook inside the cell is what helps it be round. Now, around the cell, if you remember, if we go back to here, this area right here that you see, all that's called the cell membrane or the cell wall. So that keeps the cytoplasm inside. When we have, or not have, the pump working, then we can burst the cells. Here's why. Number one, these molecules, the sodium and potassium molecules, are electrically charged. And so number one, I'm trying to say this to blow your guys' mind or confuse the hell out of you.
Too late.
It needs to maintain an electrical charge. And it does it. Now, it's not an equal charge, a little bit unequal, but it's still equilibrium. With sodium, water follows it. Water follows glucose also, but right now we're talking about sodium and potassium. Water follows sodium. It starts out inside the cell. If that sodium stays in the cell, what's going to happen to that cell?
It's going to swell.
It's going to swell. Because that sodium is not going anywhere, it's drawing water into the cell. It's going to swell until it bursts. We don't want that. We do not want that. So it needs to kick out excess sodium. Well, it also needs to bring in potassium because potassium helps with the conduction of the electrical impulses. That's why in lethal injections, or at least they used to, and some places do, where they use the 3 drugs, they give them like Ativan or Versed to kind of put them to sleep, to relax them, knock them out. Then they give them a paralytic, which paralyzes the breathing muscles. And finally, hold on a sec. Okay, when my phone does that.
Excuse me.
right, sorry about that. All right, so it needs to keep that electrical current going. Oh, I was talking about the lethal injection. So the last drug they give is potassium. They overdose a patient potassium, and what too much potassium does is it slows down the electrical impulse, especially in the heart, to the point that the heart stops beating because that signal is not able to go anymore. And so again, here we have to make sure we have a balance, equilibrium of potassium going in and out of the cell. So the sodium potassium pump is needed to keep that gradient going and to be able to keep those impulses going. So that's the sodium potassium pump. Now, the way it works is, as you see here, so sodium fills up, in this case, the left side. There's three receptor sites for sodium. Once it's full, here comes ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and that sets off the electrical charge, or it's kind of the key. It opens up the gate. And as a result, there goes that sodium. And out goes some water. While this gate is open, now here comes potassium, 2 potassium molecules. And they get into those receptor sites on the right side. So here's the 3 sodium. And out they go. Now we have the receptor sites here on the left. And we have it filled up. And then that key, that ATP pops off. In the process, it lost an ATP molecule, or one of the phosphate molecules. And so it went from 3 to 2. Do we need to replenish that? Julio, say yes. Good job,
Yes, sir.
Julio. All right. Yes, it does. And that's where burning sugar comes in. It helps replace that that phosphate molecule to get ATP once again. And it's a repetitive process throughout our entire lives. Open, close, open, close, open, close, continuously, to keep that gradient going, that concentration gradient. Okay.
What's that ADP?
Adenosine diphosphate. That means that it lost the phosphate molecule because it gave its life to open up that channel. Almost like Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan, where he gave himself to secure that bridge. No? Guys don't watch movies?
Yes, sir.
Anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Too old for me.
Of course.
Hey,
Just
hey,
don't wanna
hey,
cry.
hey.
A good movie.
It
So
was,
it lost
it
2
was
phosphate.
Band of Brothers.
So it lost 2 phosphate molecules.
It lost 1 phosphate molecule.
Oh, okay.
It started out as 3, and one of those phosphate molecules gave itself to open up that channel.
Got it.
So now it's 2, adenosine diphosphate. So now it needs to get a 3rd, and that's where metabolism comes in. All right. Now, we talked about heat, carbon dioxide, and water. So most of the ATP that's produced is used up there at the pump, sodium potassium pump. If it cannot keep up with that, like we said, that water rushes in, the pump fails, the cell will die. here's the unfortunate thing, and this is what happens when someone dies. That cell dies, it releases lysosomes. Those little critters, hey, put your mask on, Vanessa. Just watching out for you. They will go and attack the cell membrane, because what happened was that cell membrane ruptured. And so those lysosomes will go and weaken that next cell membrane. So eventually ruptures. Guess what? We got some more lysosomes. And then they attack their neighbors, weaken those cell membranes, and those burst, and so on and so on and so on. So again, upon death, because there's no more energy production, the pump fails, the cells die, they kill the neighboring cells, so on and so forth. Okay, so we want to avoid that as long as possible, right? Yes. Yes? Yes.
Yes.
So first stage of cell metabolism is anaerobic, without oxygen. We create a couple ATPs. Okay, fine and dandy. Now, even without oxygen, the longer it goes, now we're going to create 6 ATPs. Big difference, right? 6 and 36. So we're still creating a little bit of energy, but it's not enough. That's why a person gets fatigued. They get drowsy. They are not creating enough energy. That's why they have Snickers bars, right? You're not you when you're hungry. Right? Remember that? Okay. So some of you do watch football and seen the commercials. Okay.
Yes, sir.
We still have heat, water, and carbon dioxide being produced. Now, in this case, what happens is we're also creating pyruvic acid. When you hear acid being produced, the body doesn't like it. It deviates it or takes it away from homeostasis. And what do we know the body's going to do?
Try to get rid of it.
Okay. I was getting at what I was saying earlier. The body's going to do what it can to take care of itself. So the body's going to break down that pyruvic acid. But actually, let me rephrase that. The body's going to try to neutralize that acid. Now, the unfortunate thing with anaerobic metabolism and pyruvic acid is that it creates lactic acid. So Gabe is trying to buff up. He's trying to get ready for the winter, and he wants somebody to cuddle with and stay warm. So he's trying to buff up. So, he's getting past the 25 pounds total. He's up to 30 pounds now. And so he's working it out, right? But Gabe really doesn't have a trainer, and he's never had any lessons or doesn't really know anything about lifting. So as he's trying to get those 30 pounds, he's holding his breath. Now this is 30 pounds total, right? 10 and 10 on each side plus the bar is another 10. So he's holding his breath. He's like, actually his right hand stronger. Okay. What did he not do?
Breathe.
He didn't breathe. And so now tomorrow morning he goes in And he's like, ugh. And Vanessa's like, hey, how you doing? He's like, ow, that hurt. What's the matter? Oh man, my arms are sore, my chest is sore. I was working out last night. Why is he sore?
He's got to build a lactic acid.
Exactly. Forget the whole no pain, no gain. Pain is not a good thing. Because he wasn't breathing adequately, even holding his breath when he was trying to lift, he switched over to what kind of metabolism?
Anabolic.
No, not anabolic. He probably does need some
Anaerobic.
anabolics. Anaerobic metabolism.
So it lifting throw me off.
So, as a result of that anaerobic metabolism, he built up lactic acid because he didn't breathe. That pyruvic acid became fermented. It becomes fermented. I'm trying to make sure you guys realize that. Now, they're not going to ask you how's lactic acid produced. Really, the answer is pyruvic acid is fermented into lactic acid. But his muscles are being bothered by that acid just because he didn't breathe right. Bless you.
So lactic acid only happens if you're not breathing, right? So anaerobic.
Correct.
Okay.
Because you switch to anaerobic, and because of that, the waste product of anaerobic metabolism is pyruvic acid that becomes fermented. Because we normally release pyruvic acid anyway. But like I said, the body is going to take care of itself, so it's going to neutralize that. Okay. Now, real quick before I get to this next one, have you ever had like acid reflux?
Yes.
And what did you do to take care of that acid reflux?
An antacid.
What was that?
An antacid.
You took an antacid. It's an alkali.
Tums.
Or Tums, yeah, Tums. Tums, Pepto, something that helps neutralize those acids. So it's taking care of, really, it's the hydrogen ions that it's trying to neutralize, get back into a normal pH. Well, same thing here. The body releases, through the kidneys, releases bicarbonate. Just like you drink bicarbonate when you have an upset stomach, it's the same thing. It helps neutralize acid. As a result, your body is going to break it down even further. When you have an acid plus bicarbonate, we're going to get what we call carbonic acid. And if you break down carbonic acid, the remaining products are H2O and CO2. What are those? What's H2O?
Water.
Water. And what did we say the body does with water?
Reabsorbs it.
Reabsorbs it.
It reabsorbs it. And what's CO2?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. And what does the body do with carbon dioxide?
Exhale it.
Exhale.
We exhale it, get rid of it. See how the body's taking care of itself? By the body becoming acidic, it's going to break it down into something that it can manage. That's the good news. If the body's not able to do that, again, we talked about how the cells will fail. Because that lactic acid, and again, the key word there is acid, is going to weaken the cell membrane, the cell wall. they're locked together. There's phospholipid layers. And so have you ever had like a hair clog in your sink, your bathroom sink? Did you put that liquid drainer that dissolve or that takes care of those hair plugs?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It's eating away at it. Well, that's kind of what the acid level is doing to that cell wall. It's eating it away until it goes poof. It's more like that. I'm throwing some sound effects in here today. I'm in a good mood. I was telling my colleague here, I feel like I have a lot of energy today.
How many monsters did you drink, Lou?
I'm still on my first one. Although I did have a cup of coffee, just a little cup of coffee. So here's what happens in anaerobic metabolism. We still got the glucose. We don't have any oxygen. So pyruvic acid does what to create lactic acid?
Ferments.
It ferments it to create lactic acid. All right. Did that make sense? Will that make sense later when you're in your study groups? But did it make sense right now? All right, so let me put it this way. We already know we're getting a steady supply of glucose in this case. We need to breathe normally without anything interfering in order to be able to break down that sugar for energy, right? Just think about when your sugar is low, when you haven't eaten, how do you feel? Right? I'm trying to imitate wives when they say they're tired. I'm tired. No? Okay. On Sundays when the guys are watching football, they're like, honey, I'm too tired. I just got to sit here and drink some beer, eat some pizza, and hang out with the guys watching the Cowboys lose again. You now got to rub it in when they lose to the Browns. I see some of you guys are like, oh, soft spot, don't do it. Anyway. So we need that oxygen. If we have that oxygen and we have that sugar, we have energy. If for whatever reason, that's what we're going to get to next, if for whatever reason we're not getting that oxygen, we're not getting energy. And so our body really, in general, slows down. But we have other issues. The main thing is we're going to have a buildup of carbon dioxide. We don't want that because carbon dioxide, or let me rephrase that, strike that, let me rephrase it. The body recognizes carbon dioxide as an acid. It changes the pH balance. In other words, during the summer, did you guys have your AC on? Yeah, and you were comfortable at home, right? Now that AC unit breaks down. How comfortable were you?
Not comfortable at all.
Not comfortable at all. And what'd you do with that broken AC? You called a repairman, right? Or I'm sorry, repair person. Right? So you can get back to being, oh, this feels so good. Oh, dang, I need a jacket because it's so cold in here. I tried that. My bill came out to like $250. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that again. considering I never paid more than like $70 for my electric bill until I moved in with my mother, and I pay the bills, and I'm like, no, that's like half my check. Just kidding. And so we need to create that energy to be able to function. If we don't, carbon dioxide builds up and the body's not going to be functioning properly. pH balance is off. Okay. Did that help a little bit more? Okay. If not, just tell me, Lou, try again. Perfusion. In order to have normal function, we need to be able to perfuse. That's the verb. The process of perfusion is the delivery of oxygen and glucose and other things, other nutrients, but mainly oxygen and glucose, and to remove the wastes. And that perfusion needs to happen at the cellular level, because down there is where everything is occurring. If the body is not getting adequately perfused, not delivering enough sugar, oxygen, nutrients, and removing the waste, then the body is again going to be out of whack. It's going to be out of its comfort zone. And so again, what is the body going to do?
Compensate.
Okay. That's a good technical term for it. It's going to compensate. And in my Lewism, the body's going to do what it can to take care of itself, which, yeah, the word for it is to compensate. It's going to do what it can to keep up. Again, doing what it can to take care of itself. Because we need to maintain a blood pressure. We need to maintain circulation to the brain. The two most important organs the body has to take care of are the brain and the heart, in that order. So the body's going to do that to the best of its abilities. Okay? Like Vanessa is doing what she can to the best of her abilities, not to get yelled at for the 10th time today. Or is it 12th? I forget.
We're looking at
At what?
like
50?
15.
15? Oh, okay. Not as bad as I thought. So the body's going to try to take care of itself, and that's good. The components needed to maintain that perfusion. First off, the air we breathe has to be, it's composed of certain percentages of gases. There are certain gases that are present. Oxygen is not even a big enough component. It's roughly 21% of the air around us. 21%. It's not much. Sorry, my fingers are burning, so it's time to take my medicine. I should take it before they start burning. All right. So the composition of ambient air. The next one, patency of the airway. What that means is the airway open? Or is there anything that's restricting the airflow in the airway? The other word, instead of patency, we say, is the airway patent or maintain a patent airway, which just means open. Is the airway open or maintain an open airway? Just open, no obstructions. Next is the mechanics of ventilation. And we talked about that on Wednesday. Remember? No, on Monday, a week ago. Remember, diaphragm contracts, intercostal muscles contract, creating a negative pressure that brings in air. So that process has to be intact. Also, the ventilation and perfusion ratio, or the VQ ratio. And then we have transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide by the blood. If anything's interfering with that, something's going to happen. Then you have the amount of blood in your body. If you lose blood, you're losing oxygen. There is a direct relationship because who carries the oxygen? The blood. The blood is carrying oxygen. So if you're losing oxygen, if you're losing blood, you're losing oxygen. But it's not an inverse relationship. If you're losing oxygen, you're not necessarily losing blood. You're just losing oxygen. But if you're losing blood, you are losing oxygen. Another component is the function of the heart. If your heart's not working adequately, how well are you going to be able to perfuse? How well are you going to be able to deliver that blood all the way down to your left little toe? You can't. Another component, and remember we kind of talked about this on Monday. No, on Wednesday, I think, is the systemic vascular resistance. It's pressure the heart has to work against. So the more resistance there is, the harder, the better your heart's going to work to make sure it delivers oxygen to where it needs to go. Then we have mitral circulation down at the capillary level. And finally, blood pressure. Let me ask you guys a question. Do you guys need a 5-minute break to help digest all this stuff before we get to this next section?
Yes.
All right. I want to make sure, I don't want to keep going and have you guys all lost in the last part. So, all right, take 5 minutes. I'm gonna go have a quick cigarette. glucoses?
I could smell that.
I've been fortunate. I haven't had a lot of C. diff patients in my career. Sucks to be you. All right. Did you guys get some brain food? Get some sugar? All right. Is everybody back? No, slowly but surely. All right. So the components have to be in place to have good cellular perfusion in order to get the oxygen and the sugar delivered and pick up the waste. If there isn't enough perfusion, then the cells switch right away to anaerobic metabolism. And we already said what happens in anaerobic metabolism. The body starts becoming acidic, and the body doesn't like the acid. So really what our goal is to restore those components to the best of our abilities. As EMTs, we could do some stuff. If it's an oxygen issue, guess what? We can give them some oxygen. If they're having some glucose issues, we might be able to give them some glucose. It all depends. Correct. Was I using you, Gabe? Okay. No, I'm talking to. All right. Who was my other person? Was it you, Brisa? Okay. So Brisa and Gabe. I gotta write it down. Brisa and not Dave. Gabe. All right. Your name is not Dave, Gabe.
That's fine. My name was too long anyways.
Gabe Whiskers Loya. I haven't forgotten. All right, so Gabe quickly moves next to the patient to better assess his condition, while Brisa unzips the airway kit and begins to select equipment to begin patient care. So what specifically will Gabe be assessing to determine the patient's condition? How about a respiratory rate? How about a pulse ox? How about the rate, rhythm, and quality of the respirations? How about the effectiveness of the respirations? How about lung sounds? Now, how is Brisa going to know what equipment and treatment the patient needs? Are they needing help to keep the airway open? Is the patient needing help to shove that oxygen down into the lungs? Is the patient conscious or unconscious? So now, this one, I'm not giving you any help. What's happening at the cellular level?
Anaerobic metabolism and the breakdown of the cells.
All right, because there's not enough perfusion, the body's going to switch to anaerobic, and we might get a breakdown of the cells due to that buildup of acid.
Cellular hypoxia.
What was that?
Cellular hypoxia.
We can have cellular hypoxia. So we kind of answered the fourth one. What will happen if the EMTs do not intervene quickly?
Cellular hypoxia.
Okay. The patient's going to deteriorate and get worse. So as I mentioned earlier, the ambient air, the air around us, as we inhale, we're not only inhaling oxygen. Oxygen is only about 21%. It's actually rounded up. It's like 20.81, I think it is. I know it's 20.8, but it's rounded up to 21%. 79%, if we go by 20.8, there's a little bit left over. 79% or almost 79% is nitrogen. And the remaining stuff is trace amounts of argon and carbon dioxide. That's what's around us. So we inhale all that stuff. But we're really only using the the oxygen. Yeah. Oh, here they use 20.95. Depends which book you use. Now, FiO2, fraction of inspired oxygen. That's normal. When we inhale, we're inhaling a fraction of oxygen. Now, it's just understanding the terms. You don't need to know more about it. You do if you're going to be a respiratory therapist. If not, just understand FiO2 is the amount of oxygen that's going to be inhaled. And RTs can adjust that based on the doctor's order. The other term is FiO2, the fraction of delivered oxygen. So when we breathe normally, that's your FiO2. If we're having issues breathing and we push air in, then that's fraction of delivered oxygen. So if we have a decrease in the FiO2, we could give a patient supplemental oxygen. That's when we put them on a mask or a cannula. And we improve the fraction of delivered oxygen. We're raising up the oxygen levels. Okay. Now, what I am going to tell you right now, and getting ahead of myself a little bit, but I just thought of it. How do we get oxygen into our lungs? How do we get oxygen into our lungs?
Inhalation.
Okay, and how does that occur?
Through positive pressure?
No.
Negative pressure.
Through negative pressure. So the diaphragm contracts, the intercostal muscles contract, expanding the rib cage, creating a negative pressure. If your patient is unable to fully expand his chest, and or create that negative pressure, are we able to get oxygen into the body?
I'd say no.
No. So let me ask you this. You have a patient that's not breathing. So you're like, oh, they need oxygen. And you give them, or you put them on a non-rebreather mask. One of the masks. Is that helping them?
No.
No,
No, why?
because they're not able to get the needed oxygen either way.
Because
They're not breathing correctly still.
yeah, the mechanical process is not correct.
Correct. There's no negative pressure being created. So that oxygen's not going to go anywhere. Same thing if the person is having a hard time breathing and not creating sufficient negative pressure, that oxygen is not going to go anywhere. And so that's where we use positive pressure. We're shoving, that's why I like to say it that way, we're shoving air into the lungs with that positive pressure. All right. So questions on the component or composition. So just understand that the normal composition of air, or I'm sorry, the normal composition of oxygen in air is 21%. That's a good number. Below 19%, it is not sufficient. The body's not going to like that. I had a lot more people on camera earlier than I do now. How is that?
We're trying to hide.
I know you are. No hiding.
I was eating.
I was eating too.
Yeah.
Jeez. I still had more people earlier. All right. So next, the patency of the airway, or making sure that airway is open. We have to make sure there's a clear path for that air to get down into the alveoli, because that's where the exchange of gases occurs. So when we get to a patient, an unresponsive patient, we have to make sure they have an open airway. And if you remember in CPR, and VNA hasn't been here to do your card, so don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. When we get to that patient, we open the airway and we look, listen, and feel to see if there's any air movement. If there isn't, then we give a breath. If it goes in, cool, we still give another breath. If it doesn't, we reposition and we give another breath. So we have to make sure there's no obstruction. This is why I still disagree with AHA when they say CAB. Although I understand if they're unconscious or dead, you got to worry about circulation first. But I disagree because without a patent airway, open airway, you don't have a viable patient. You could pump the chest all day long, all month long, all year long. If you're not getting oxygen into the bloodstream, you're not going to have a person alive for very long. So airway is very important. And we already know what happens if we don't get oxygen. You guys said it earlier. Cellular hypoxia. So think about the path that the oxygen travels. If you have a blockage or an occlusion, obstruction, whatever term you want to use, if there's something blocking that airway, air's not going to get through. In the nose, in the mouth. If the epiglottis is swollen shut, no oxygen is going to get down into the trachea because that epiglottis is swollen shut. If you have something in the larynx or down the trachea, and then you have the bronchioles and the bronchi and the bronchioles. That big path, big area to cover. Air needs to be able to flow through. When there's illnesses or injuries to any of those parts, obviously we're not going to get a lot of airflow, and the body is going to resent it. And that's when we start seeing the changes. I think it's time again. My fries are cold. All right. Questions on the patency of an airway? All right. I've talked about, oh, there's my mask. So Vanessa doesn't feel alone with the mask. There you go. Solidarity. So Vanessa, are you in here, Vanessa?
I believe she had to step out, sir.
No wonder it's been quiet. All right. Yeah, I'll pick your partner. You pissed her off. So Brisa's pissed off at you. And she slugs you as hard as she can in the ribs. And you go, and it really, really hurt. Are you going to have a problem getting air into the lungs?
Or maybe a couple of breaths, yeah.
No. She's really strong. Don't make me have her take out the bat and hit you in the ribs.
Yes, that would be difficulty to regain my breath.
All right. Are you going to be able to take a nice full deep breath?
No, it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. So as a result of that pain, we know you're not going to be able to take a full deep breath. What's your breath going to be like?
Short and quick.
Short and quick. So shallow respirations, because you can't fully expand. Now, remember what I said about carbon dioxide buildup. So what's going to start happening to your carbon dioxide level in your body?
It's going to build up.
It's going to
because
build
I'm not
up.
getting enough oxygen in.
Exactly. Now, what drives us to breathe?
The release of, or needing to release oxygen.
Nope. We don't release oxygen.
I mean, carbon dioxide.
Exactly. What drives us to breathe is the buildup of carbon dioxide. We call that the carbonic drive. The carbonic drive drives us to breathe. It's a buildup of carbon dioxide. Remember we said the body doesn't like it? So we're going to breathe to help eliminate that excess carbon dioxide. So we just established that Gabe's carbon dioxide level is increasing. So what's going to happen to his respiratory rate? Or let me rephrase it. the carbon dioxide level is going up, right? So what's the body going to do? I've said it a few times. One of my Lewisms.
It's gonna get weak.
No.
Gonna try to compensate.
I didn't just compensate, but yeah. But what's my Lewism?
Drink a Monster.
No. That's a law.
Smoke a cigarette.
No.
Body does what it can to take care of itself.
Thank you, Jesse. Was that Jesse or Rakisha?
That was just.
Was it what?
It was Jesse.
Jesse. I thought that was Jesse. Sorry, Jesse. There you are. So Jesse's correct. The body's going to do what it can to take care of itself. So with the excess or the increased carbon dioxide, the body wants to take care of itself. And so what's going to happen to that respiratory rate?
It's gonna increase.
It's going to increase. So back to Gabe and his breathing, he's building up the carbon dioxide. He's already has shallow respirations, but the rate's going to be what?
Rapid and shallow.
Rapid. Yeah, the death is shallow because it hurts to take a deep breath. And it's going to be rapid because he's trying to blow off, it's what we call it, blow off the excess amounts or the increased amounts of carbon dioxide. Did that make sense? I didn't lose too many people with that? Okay. So on Monday, I think it was Monday, I kind of talked about Boyle's law. And it's weird to explain it. Boyle's law says that the pressure of a gas is inversely proportional to the amount. The simple way to understand it as EMT students is where there's a higher pressure, it goes to a lower pressure to attempt to equalize. Because isn't that what's happening when we breathe? The higher pressure goes to the negative pressure, or the positive pressure goes to the negative, higher to lower. Which one's which? When we talk about the pleura. Because there's layers around the lungs.
Visceral is inner.
Okay.
And pleural is outer.
Parietal.
Parietal
is the outer layer. And so the lungs expand and there's friction between the two layers. So there's a fluid in there, a lubricant, that helps the gliding of the lung as it goes through. Okay. What occurs just prior to the movement of air into the lungs on inhalation? C or D?
D.
D?
On inhalation?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait.
Movement.
Good job, Marisol. So Gabe is still struggling to breathe because Brisa really smacked him hard. She's stronger than she looks. And so isn't Gabe's body trying to compensate and get more air in, but by the same token, get more carbon dioxide out? Yeah. And so what his body, because again, we've established and we know that it's going to do what it can to take care of itself, it's going to use what we call accessory muscles. They are muscles that don't get used normally unless they're needed. And those muscles will help either expand the chest or help push out extra CO2. So when you're looking at a patient having a hard time breathing, you want to look for accessory muscles. If they're using those, then we know that they're really struggling to breathe. Now, the bad thing about those muscles, though, is just like other muscles, they require energy. And because we normally don't use them, they don't use up any energy. Now, they do. What's the downside to that? What is the downside?
You get tired? Fatigue?
Why?
They're creating positive pressure.
Well, it's doing it anyway.
Because they're burning more energy than they're making.
Exactly. Because of that lack of oxygen, it's not producing enough energy, and those muscles are burning up more energy than it's able to create, or the body's able to create to satisfy those needs. It's kind of like your wife goes shopping all the time and she doesn't work. So you got to work overtime to be able to have that money. That's it. It's Pick on Wives and Girlfriends Day. Don't worry, Wednesday we'll pick on husband and boyfriend day. I'm an equal opportunity picker on her. I'm just kidding though, but no, it's not able to maintain what it has right now, and you're expecting it to work more. No, the body's going to tire out quicker, and that's really the thing you have to worry about. So these are the muscles, or some of the muscles that we use. They're accessory muscles. The sternocleidomastoid is right here. Attaches the sternum, the clavicle, and the jaw. And so it helps bring the sternum up to help expand the chest. You have the scalene muscles, which are right in here, in the first and second ribs, so right in here. Okay. Right in here and right in here. So you'll see them. And then the pectoralis minor muscle. Again, it's getting those ribs up to help bring air in. So what does it mean if you see a patient using accessory muscles?
You're struggling to breathe?
Yeah, the person having a hard time breathing, they're trying to get more air in or push air out. You also have abdominal muscles and then the internal intercostal muscles. So they're really trying to open up that rib cage to let more air in.
So is that why when I was younger, well, I have asthma, but when I was younger, I used to have it really, really bad. And like when they would hospitalize me, when I would get out of the hospital, I feel like I just worked out, like my abs, my chest, everything would be sore.
Yep. Yeah, because you're using all those muscles. Especially with severe asthma, yeah. You're really working to breathe. And so, yeah, it really hurt. Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right. Resistance and compliance. If there's resistance, how easily is the air able to move through?
Not that well.
Not that well. It's like doing a slip and slide without any water on the slip and slide. You're not going to slip and slide very far. And then as far as compliance goes, how well are the lungs expanding? If there's stuff there that reduces the compliance, then the lungs are not going to expand. And so how much air is going to go in? Not very much, right?
No.
Not very much. So we have to have that air be able to go in without resistance or minimal resistance. And we have to have good compliance of the lung in order for it to inflate and actually use that air. Let that oxygen go down into the alveoli, the pockets where the exchange of gases is occurring at the lungs. Easy in and out. So as far as the pleural space, we were talking a little bit about it with Gabe and his injury for talking smack to Brisa. Way to go, Brisa, by the way. Now, the pleural space is the space in between the pleura. If we start getting air into that space inside the chest, that increased pressure can actually cause the lung to collapse. And that pressure, or I'm sorry, the way that air gets in there could be because of disease that caused a weakness in the lung that caused the lung to burst and let air out. Now it's getting trapped. Or it could be Candace taking a fork and stabbing her husband in the chest with it because he complained about her cooking.
That would totally happen too.
Uh-oh. So, Candace's husband, don't complain about her cooking. You've been warned.
It's actually funny that you say that because he's sitting right next to me listening.
Did he agree with me?
Yes.
See, I got the husband's back today. Oh, but so don't take a green Gatorade from her. That's what we were talking about this morning, so. You'll have to wait to chapter 22. Yeah, 22 to learn why. But let's just put it this way. It's the same color as antifreeze. So anyway, so yeah, a penetrating injury to the chest will cause air to go inside. And we don't want that because, again, that increased pressure is going to cause the lung to collapse. And then what just happened to the compliance? It went to hell in a handbasket. It's almost non-existent because that lung is not expanding to let all that air in. All right. What we try to establish, what we want normal, is what we call minute ventilation. And there's a question somewhere, I don't remember if it's a quiz or a test. It has a kind of a right answer, but it's not the right answer. So I'll give it to you guys when you answer it if you get it wrong. What is the formula for minute ventilation? In other words, before we get there, minute ventilation is the amount of air that we inhale and exhale in 1 minute. So how do we determine that minute ventilation?
Tidal volume times frequency of ventilation.
Okay, now tell me in your own words.
It's how much breath you take in times the number of breaths you take in a minute.
Okay. All right, better. So it's the tidal volume, the amount of air that goes in, times the respiratory rate. Normal adult respiratory rate is 12 to 20 times a minute. Normal tidal volume for an adult is approximately 500 mLs, 500 milliliters, or 500 cc's. 1 milliliter equals 1 cubic centimeter. So I use them interchangeably, mLs, cc's, same thing. So Candace is breathing at 20 times a minute. What is her minute volume? In other words, how much air is she moving in and out in 1 minute? Anybody?
Isn't it 10,000 mLs?
Is it like or is it?
It is.
Yes, it is. 500 times 20 equals 10,000. All right. Is breathing at 16 times a minute.
8,000.
8,000. So normal is, some books will say about 5,000 to 10,000 cc's in a minute. That's normal tidal volume. I'm sorry, that's normal minute volume.
For adults, right?
Yes. So if they're getting less, are they having an issue?
Yep.
Yeah. So we have to have enough tidal volume and the respiratory rate to have adequate tidal volume. If Steve is breathing at 28 times a minute, but because he's breathing so fast, His tidal volume's only 350. What's that number?
90.
It's what?
Like 98.
Okay. The problem, though, is, which we'll find out soon, that's not enough. We have to have adequate numbers. So decreases tidal volume, decreases minute volume, decreases respiratory rate, decreases minute volume. But the problem with a decrease in that minute volume decreases the amount of oxygen that's in the alveoli. Here's why. In a normal breath, 500 cc's of air is what's breathed in. However, out of that 500, 150 is actually reaching the alveoli. I'm sorry, 150 goes into what we call dead space. Doesn't do anything, doesn't get to the alveoli. So we're losing 150 cc's out of every 500. So earlier with Steve's 300 cc's, what is actually getting to the alveoli?
150.
Only 150. Is 150 cc's of air going to be sufficient to keep Steve going?
Nope.
No. No. This is where we come in. Because the hypoxia, now what is hypoxia? I think I gave you guys a definition the other day. What is hypoxia?
Low breathing.
No. That's bradypnea.
Was it the absence of oxygen?
The what, I'm sorry?
The absence of enough oxygen
Where?
In the lungs?
in the tissue?
No.
Blood.
At the cellular level.
Yeah.
Hypoxia is low oxygen levels at the cellular, or low oxygen at the cellular level. All right. So with hypoxia, low oxygen levels or low oxygen at the cellular level, if we're not breathing fast enough. Too fast? Okay. It's fine. But the problem there is what?
Not enough oxygen.
Yeah, you're not getting enough volume. And if you're breathing normal, but your respiratory rate is not enough, then what?
Same difference.
Same difference. All right. All right. Any questions on mechanics? So we have to be able to breathe, and we have to be able to get that oxygen down where we need to go. All right. So I was talking about this earlier. First off, do we have to think about breathing?
No, sir.
I'm checking to see if there's any blondes in class. I don't see any. Did I tell you the joke about the blonde in the headphones? No, okay. So there was this lady, I won't mention her hair color. There was this lady that always walked around with headphones on everywhere she went. And one day she's passing underneath a tree and the headphones get knocked off and she collapses to the ground and she dies. Before she dies, this guy that would always see her walking around goes up to her and is curious about what she was always listening to. So he picks it up and listens in on the headphones. And what he hears is this: breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. I'd kill myself. Marisol didn't like it. Yes, I am. Did you hear Nicole? She's like, because you're not funny.
She hasn't told a lie yet.
I heard that, Gabe. And of course she said, see, they laugh at me. Well, fine, go with her. Let her be your new instructor. Oh yeah, I still sign your shirts, by the way. I don't care if she's your instructor. I still sign your shirts. Or don't sign your shirts, either way. Haha. They didn't laugh. Not even Kersey chuckled because I signed their shirts. Hey, you guys are too serious tonight. Loosen up. Anyway, going back to the blonde, I mean to that lady. Oh hell no. Do we have to listen to a recording telling us to breathe in and out?
No.
Do we have to think about it when we sleep about breathing in and out?
Nope.
No. It happens automatically. So it's part of the autonomic nervous system. We don't have to think about breathing. As I said, when the carbon dioxide levels increase, the body adjusts. How? I'm old and forgetful, so you got to remind me. How does it work?
Adjust the rate of respiration.
Yeah.
How does it adjust it?
Frequency.
And I can see you're reading it from right here, to adjust the rate of respiration. No. Give me your own words. I know you can read. Because you're on chapter 17. You're probably on 19 now.
18, he said.
Carbonic drive. Elevated carbon dioxide level causes us to breathe faster. Now, how does the body know, though, that we have a buildup of carbon dioxide?
Chemoreceptors.
Is that you, Jesus?
Yes, sir.
All right, good job. Who said wildland firefighters don't know diddly squat?
Hell yeah.
That was Gabe that said it. Sorry.
Damn, Gail, I thought we were cool.
What do they say when we assume? Just kidding.
Jesus, just remember this. They fight wildland fires in structure gear. So that tells you a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. It's an inside firefighter thing. Anyway, chemoreceptors, just like Jesus said, chemoreceptors. A way to remember that chemoreceptors are measuring the carbon dioxide levels. They also measure hydrogen ions, which is acidity or basic. And also oxygen levels is, think about chemoreceptors, chemo as in chemicals. So the chemoreceptors measure the chemical levels in the blood. Very good way to learn it, remember it. Chemoreceptors measure the chemicals. All right. So those chemoreceptors send the signals to the brain. The brain goes do 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 do. All right. It processes it and tells the respiratory center. What's the respiratory center at? The brainstem.
Medulla.
Medulla.
Medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata. All right. So we breathe faster or slower. All right. So the carbonic drive or the hypercapnic drive, same thing. And then the hypoxic drive. Hypoxic drive is when the oxygen levels go down, but that doesn't drive us to breathe. It's the carbonic drive, the buildup of carbon dioxide, or really carbon dioxide levels. But it's increased carbon dioxide. Now, what happens, so we're right now, all of us, even me being a smoker, we all have the carbonic drive intact. But with old people, like in their 50s and 60s, I'm a little over a year away from being 50. That sucks. Anyway.
I'm months away.
Have you gotten your AARP offer yet?
No, not yet.
It's coming. Oh, sure it's coming. This happens to a lot of smokers. Not every smoker, but a lot of smokers. But also people that were exposed to other chemicals. You know, if they worked in factories, they worked in coal mines and mines. Over a period of time, all that carbon dioxide, because of the substances, it gets retained in the body. And so the body gets used to that increased carbon dioxide level. So eventually it says, okay, I'm going to keep you here. So it adjusts. And that's when we revert or we switch over to a hypoxic drive, where now the oxygen levels drive us to breathe, and it's no longer the carbon dioxide levels. Okay. All right. So there are the receptor sites in the medulla, the brainstem, in the lungs, the aorta. The only receptors I'm really going to talk about are the stretch receptors. What do the stretch receptors do? Here's a hint. We take a breath in. When and why do we stop inhaling and start exhaling? Nicole, you're supposed to be out of here.
So don't they measure the volume of the lungs too? Like how much air to take in and all that?
Nope. I mean, as far as measuring the exact amount of air, no.
No, but like it like tells it when to stop, no?
But what does? That's what I'm trying to get at. First off, there's a reflex. That reflex is called the Herring-Brewer reflex, where we reach the maximum inhalation point and then it causes us to stop and start breathing out. The other thing is what I told you I was going to talk about, the stretch receptors. Receptors in the lung that get to a point that they no longer stretch. And we start exhaling. So the Herring-Brewer reflex helps us stop the inhalation, as do the stretch receptors. Yeah. All right, so back to our patient. So the patient is working hard to breathe and has pale, moist skin. Roro. He's using accessory muscles to breathe. So what did we establish with accessory muscles? You established a couple things. What was that?
He's struggling to breathe.
He's struggling to breathe. And what is he using more of that he can't replace very quickly?
Energy.
Energy. So later on when we talk about, and I don't think it's today, but later on when we start talking about respiratory failure, we're going to see our patient start become drowsy because he's very far gone. Not to say he's worm food, just saying that he's really, really tired now. But seems to be moving very little air. He's struggling. Hey, look, the patient appears sleepy as if on the verge of exhaustion. Respiratory failure. Brisa selects a BVM to assist the patient's ventilations and connects it to supplemental oxygen. So what kind of medical problems do you think could lead a patient to have such severe difficulty breathing?
Could have trauma to the lungs, right, sir?
Yeah. Oh, that's asking for medical problems, but yeah, trauma can cause asthma,
Pneumonia.
Yeah, like bronchitis, some type of like thing that's infecting the
bronchitis.
Yeah, like something.
What about COPD?
Yeah.
Emphysema?
Would an emphysema give them like a flush color?
A little bit, but as we're going to talk about the pale skin, not getting enough oxygen. All right.
Cool.
Are you guys ready for another quick break?
Sure.
Because VQ mismatch can be a little bit confusing. Don't worry, Paula. I got you. All right, take a quick break. But I decided to take a break. But look. sent you the email list, right? You have their email? Yes. So yeah, you could also email it to them on this share with the envelope for email. I just put in or I set it up in my Outlook, put all their email addresses in there, and I created that category.
It won't let it do it on mine. I have to like create it myself. It pops it up, but it won't let me email all of them because it says it's not my contact. So I'll just, that's easy. I want to add all of them.
You have access to the phone roster.
Yeah.
So. All right. All right, welcome back. How are you doing, Mr. Patrick? Cool. All right. So moving on to VQ ratio, ventilation perfusion. V stands for ventilation, Q stands for perfusion. So really, when we're talking about the VQ ratio, we're talking about the relationship between the alveolar ventilation, or how much oxygen is getting into the alveoli, and the perfusion, the blood flow into those capillaries. As air comes in, all right. Are you okay there, Paula? Looks like you're hallucinating and stuff. I believe that you believe that there's something flying in front of you. All right. All right. I want you. All right. So here's the alveoli. And then you have the capillary through it. So as we get oxygen coming in down this way, that's the ventilation part. We have enough oxygen going to the alveoli. And then we have to make sure you see the little red lines inside the pink line? That's blood flow. So the VQ ratio is enough oxygen going into the alveoli, enough blood flow going through that capillary, because because what we want is exactly what you see on the right side of that diagram. We want to make sure that enough oxygen is going to the bloodstream. We got carbon dioxide coming out of it, and then flowing, exchanging. And we have to make sure we have a good ratio there. oxygen in, enough bloodstream to be able to get all that oxygen, and the carbon dioxide to be able to get out and be exhaled. So that relationship is going to influence that gas exchange. And the gas exchange is oxygen and carbon dioxide right here. So we have the oxygen that's coming in and the carbon dioxide that's going out. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, by the way, just so you know. So overall, more perfusion is there than ventilation. Got to make sure we have enough oxygen in the bloodstream. But it works. It works. Now, if there's more ventilation than perfusion, there's wasted ventilation, not used. And same thing, if there's better perfusion than ventilation, then we have wasted perfusion. So for example, if we have good adequate ventilations, but we don't have enough of a pulse, we're not able to circulate as much oxygen because there's not enough blood around to carry all that oxygen. And by the same token, we have good perfusion, good flow, but not enough oxygen. Well, we got extra oxygen with not enough oxygen, or extra blood without enough oxygen. So we need to maintain that. So here's an example. Actually, two examples. The first one, see if you can see this. Okay. So this is the trachea right there. And then we have the bronchi right here. And eventually we have the bronchioles in here. So who do I need to pick on? Or, Ashley. We'll say Ashley. So Ashley, you were chewing gum. But for whatever reason, it went down the wrong pipe. Went down near your trachea. And it kept on going because it was a small piece of gum. And it had some spit on it. So it slid down till it got to a smaller bronchiole. So what happens to the air when it reaches that obstruction, which is right here?
It forces the other one to work more, isn't it? I mean, because it's not gonna, nothing's gonna be coming out of there. It's just covering it.
Okay. So yeah, more of it's going to be coming over here. But again, remember that mismatch? Well, we're not at the mismatch yet. But are we going to have wasted circulation? Yeah, because there's not wasted perfusion because we don't have enough air coming in. So you're right. The area beyond that blockage, it's just like you're trying to go down Montana, but they have Montana closed off for whatever reason. So can you go any further without detouring? No, it just stopped. But let's say they do have a detour and everybody is going on that detour. So yeah, you got more traffic on the side streets, but the main thoroughfare where you go faster, 65 and a 35, right? I'd never do that. So the bloodstream over here That bloodstream is still intact. But is it getting any oxygen? And the answer is no. Because none got there. You guys follow? Okay. Now let's flip it around. We have air going into alveoli. No wasted air. Let me change color here. We have air going into alveoli. But we have a blood clot, what we call pulmonary embolism, right here. So as that bloodstream, as that blood is going through that blood vessel, do we have any bloodstream going into the capillary around the alveoli? No, we don't. So is the bloodstream getting that oxygen load? And better yet, is it offloading that carbon dioxide? No. Right? You guys follow? Either we're not getting air into the alveoli with normal circulation, or we have normal ventilation, but no blood flow. So either way, we're not able to get that oxygen to where it needs to go. You guys follow? Yes, no? Okay, I'm seeing one person shaking or nodding their head. You see the alveoli at the bottom. We're getting oxygen into the alveoli. And we have blood flow getting into the capillaries around the alveoli. So we have that oxygen getting to the bloodstream. And we have that carbon dioxide getting off the bloodstream. That's the way it normally works. Because what's that process of exchanging gases? And I don't mean perfusion or respiration. Diffusion. Diffusion is the process of exchanging gases from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. I'm going to put it on the chat. The process of exchanging gases by a gas going from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Is Vanessa back, Gabe?
I think she should be. Let me see.
Oh. She texted me an hour and a half ago. All right. Anyway.
I'll shoot you a text if you text me though.
All right. So Gabe and Julio. Gabe and Julio are sitting close by at the office. And Gabe decides to rip one. You know what I mean? Fast little gas, just like guys do. Women too, by the way. So Gabe right away smells it because he dealt it. And because Gabe and Julio are following social distancing rules, Julio's about 6 feet away. And in a few moments, all of a sudden he goes, and of course he's going to scream, Gabe, you a-hole, right? Because it hit his senses. So why did it take Julio a few moments to realize what Gabe did?
He was probably stunned.
Probably knocked him unconscious. Because it's going to take a bit for that gas, literally, to diffuse from the area where it was dealt to an area of lower concentration.
Right.
That's diffusion. Or better yet, smell good spray, Lysol, Febreze, whatever. When you first spray it right around you, oh, that smells good. And as it spreads, then other people can smell it down the line. So same thing is happening here with oxygen and carbon dioxide. Because if we go back to this, right now, where's the higher? This is the alveoli, and this is the bloodstream, the capillary. Although it's not a bunch of little red blood cells, it's single file. Where is the higher concentration of oxygen at? It's right here in the alveoli, right? Mm-hmm. It's higher in the alveoli than in the bloodstream. At the tissue level, it's the opposite. The higher levels here than here. And then where's the higher level of carbon dioxide?
In the blood.
In the blood. And lower, or let me. So this area of higher concentration of carbon dioxide in this case is higher where again?
In the blood.
In the blood. And lower where?
In alveoli.
Alveoli. So through diffusion, what's going to happen? Look at your chat. Diffusion, the process of exchanging gases by gas going from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. So it goes this way. And then the carbon dioxide, the oxygen, then higher here, lower here. So it's going to go that way. Is it making sense? Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of head nodding now. So good. So that's what's happening. We have to make sure that is maintained. Diffusion. Exchange of gases. All right. So blood pressure is important to be maintained, not just to get blood up into the brain, but to maintain blood flow through the capillaries. If there's too much pressure within the alveoli, not enough pressure in the blood, then there's no blood flow because that pressure is greater and it's pressing down. When that pressure goes up, then it's keeping that balance, that pressure balance. I don't want to concentrate too much on that because that's not going to be something you're going to be tested on, okay? But just understand there has to be a pressure balance. Remember equilibrium. There's give and take, just like in a relationship, there's give and take. And so this relationship, there's give and take. If one takes too much, then we're going to have issues in the body. Does that make sense? So with ventilatory issues is what we talked about before. If you have less oxygen going to the alveoli, you got a lot of blood that's not getting oxygen. And are the tissues down the line going to be really appreciative of what you did? Really, it's what the body's doing, but yeah, the tissues are not going to be happy. So what just happened to that energy production?
Just went down.
It went down. Because you're not providing the resources it needs to create that energy. Now, if you have a perfusion disturbance or an issue, blood flow issue, you're not delivering enough oxygen because you don't have enough blood to take that oxygen around. You could try to give more oxygen, although that's not always the solution, but you could try on some things. But you really got to fix that blood flow issue. So if you have the freeway, nowadays it's better than it used to be. I think it's pretty much open. But remember when they had closed, or they were doing a lot of construction on the 10 over on the east side? I'm sorry, on the west side? How good was traffic flow with all that construction going, especially during rush hour? Horrendous, right?
It was hell.
Yeah. So even though you had detours, was there still a lot of backup around it? Yeah. And so really, what did they need to do? They needed to fix the freeway. Oh, he looks tired now, Miss Jessie. It's not the same wide awake baby. He is? No, he's tired.
That's right. It's time for bed.
Yep.
Yep.
Hey, you still got an hour. Huh? Still got an hour. All right. So yeah, so you had to repair the freeway to reestablish good flow through that area. And so same thing here with the body. That perfusion issue has to be fixed. So, all right. So we've been talking about this. There's your diffusion. And not to worry about it. We talked about hemoglobin. Hemoglobin contains iron. We talked about anemia, right? Or maybe not. I know I mentioned iron level. But iron is used to help the oxygen bind to the hemoglobin. If you have lower iron level, not enough oxygen is binding to the hemoglobin. And so that's why the person feels run down, tired. Because again, as we've been mentioning, if you're not getting the oxygen, you're not burning the sugar to create the energy. All right, we talked about how carbon dioxide is transported. I'm not worried about that. We already talked about it. And we talked about this already, so. All right, so questions. All right, I got good news and bad news for you. Nobody's curious?
Just say it at the same time.
What?
I'll say my good news, you say your bad news. We'll say it at the same time.
It's 2020, Lou. There's no such thing as good news.
There will be after the election.
We'll see.
Well, somebody's going to get good news sometime after the election. Who knows when, but. No, the good news is that all bleeding eventually stops. And the bad news is that all bleeding eventually stops. It's good news and bad news. So the good news is you don't have to worry about it much because all bleeding will eventually stop. The bad news is there's only so much blood in your body. So all bleeding eventually stops. The average adult, now they talk about the average adult male and the average adult female volumes and stuff, but it's hard to do the math based on that. If you just think about this, the average adult has 5 liters of blood. Now, as you have that volume, you have blood pressure. Because the heart has to work. Remember we talked about it a little bit? The heart has to work to push that blood all throughout the body. And we have that systemic vascular resistance. So what resistance does the heart have to work against? A lot of that volume of blood is found in the veins. Some of it is in the arteries. Okay. So we kind of talked about pressure the other day, remember? So the way to think about hydrostatic pressure is what we talked about the other day is, and we get volume going through the vessels, but in order for it to keep its shape, there has to be so much hydrostatic pressure. So it's a push on the inside. But there's also oncotic pressure. And that oncotic pressure is on the outside. So think about a submarine. You see the movies where they go too deep and all of a sudden that pressure from the outside, from the water depth, starts pushing in on the submarine? Some of you yes, some of you no. Okay.
Yes.
So think about the outside pressure on that submarine as that oncotic pressure. The hydrostatic pressure, though, is the pressure inside that is pushing against that oncotic pressure. Does it make sense? Or let me, even though it's rigid, ow, fudge. Oh, all right. I have a straw in front of me. The oncotic pressure is pushing down on this straw. The hydrostatic pressure inside is pushing it out. So the two coming together is what's giving it a shape. It's preventing from collapsing. All right, so oncotic, hydrostatic. Oncotic, hydrostatic. Chihuahua. So there you go. Outside, pushing up is what?
Hydrostatic.
And pushing down?
Oncotic.
Just so you understand the concept. There's pressures. Pressure is needed to push blood through. If not, blood's not going anywhere. All right. Back to my watered down Diet Coke. Most of us have a heart. I don't. I'm cold, I'm ruthless, I'm mean. I make people cry. But we have a heart. The heart is a pump that pushes the blood throughout the body. Now, there's another formula to consider. And that formula is cardiac output. How much volume is the heart actually pushing out? Because if you think about it, if there's not enough volume, how much oxygen is actually going to get down to the tissue?
Not much.
Not much. So we have to make sure we push enough volume. And so the concept is called cardiac output. What is cardiac output? Hannah?
The amounts of blood that is injected by the left ventricle in a minute.
Okay. So how do we determine cardiac output? You're right. It's the amount of blood ejected by the heart in a minute, or by the left ventricle in 1 minute. But how do we determine that cardiac output?
What do you mean?
There's a formula to determine what that cardiac output is.
The heart rate times the stroke volume?
You're not Hannah.
Oops.
But you're right. So what did he say?
Heart rate times stroke volume.
Not you.
The heart rate times the. They cut off so the.
At least you're honest.
Stroke volume.
Stroke volume. There you go.
Heart rate times stroke volume. What is the stroke volume?
Is that still on me?
No, that's anybody. That's an overhead question.
It's the volume of blood with each contraction of the heart.
Okay, and how do we determine that? Don't worry about it. There is a formula. It depends on the person's weight and the amount of blood volume. Don't ask me because everybody's different. But what we need to understand about cardiac output, first off, heart rate times stroke volume, or to determine cardiac output, heart rate times stroke volume. Excuse you?
Sorry.
That's recorded. Holy cow. What we need to know about cardiac output is that the body has to push out so much blood. If there's not enough blood to be pushed out, either slow heart rate or not enough stroke volume, then perfusion is going to be decreased because not enough oxygen is getting delivered to where it needs to go. So Amazon doesn't have all the drivers to drop off. Now, when we talk about stroke volume, the two biggest concepts here, and I really need you guys to understand this, okay? The two biggest factors here, or two biggest concepts you have to understand. First off, it's preload. Preload is how much blood is available to be pushed out. What you have available to be sent out. And then the afterload, so preload, right ventricle. How much is available to be pushed out? Because remember, the venous system has the majority of the blood and the pressure. I'm sorry, the majority of the blood. So there has to be enough blood available to be sent to the lungs to get oxygen. Comes back into the left side, the left ventricle. Now, the left ventricle needs to push. And to determine how much pressure it's needed, that's what the afterload is. The amount of pressure or resistance that the left ventricle has to work against. So right now, the amount of resistance Gabe gets from me is easy because he's only getting it from me. Now you add on 10 of you giving him a hard time. Is he gonna have, does he have more resistance? Yeah, he does.
Dude, there's already 10 of you.
At least. My goal is to get 12 by the end of tonight. And Jesse's baby counts too. So the afterload is how much pressure the heart has to work against. Because there's already that pressure, remember? We talked about it on Monday. There's already pressure being put on those walls. Remember the osmotic and hydrostatic pressure? So there's already pressure there. So how much force does the left ventricle have to use to be able to get that blood through that narrowed blood vessel?
So then preload is the amount that needs to be pushed. Afterload is how hard we're pushing it?
Correct.
Okay.
But remember, preload deals with the right side of the heart, and afterload deals with the left.
The left.
Now, the contractility is how much contractility is there in the heart to be able to punch or to push. If there's low contractility, it's not. I guess the other term that we could use, although it's not the technical term, contractility is, but to simplify it, think about elasticity. How elastic is the heart to be able to pump? Does that make sense? Are you sure, Miss Paula? I can see it on your face.
You cut out. Can you repeat that? What does it mean?
Think about the elasticity of the heart. Because we know the heart does this, right? So good contractility, it's able to pump adequately. If we have reduced contractility, then we don't have a lot of elasticity to help push out that blood from the ventricles. Did that help? Okay. I think it did. I don't know. So it's preload again?
How much pressure is needed
Nope.
to push it out?
Nope.
It's the amount of blood to be pushed from the
Oh,
right
there you
side.
go.
The amount of blood available to be pushed out by the right ventricle. What's contractility?
The elasticity of the heart? No.
Elasticity of the heart.
Timo.
And then what's afterload?
The amount of pressure.
There's a resistance.
The amount of resistance. Now, if we have decreased preload, they're showing it on the left ventricle, which still it's amount of blood, but left ventricle, or I'm sorry, the amount of blood available, normal, we have normal volume, we're able to push out a normal amount. If we have a decreased preload, then we have less, or with less volume, we're pushing out less volume. You hear the elasticity, the force of the contraction? Normal, we're able to push out that amount. If we still have the same amount of volume, but less contractility, less force, then we're not pushing out sufficient amount of blood. That's affecting your stroke volume. Because again, how much volume is getting pushed out in a minute? Not a lot.
It's cardiac function.
Exactly. It decreases cardiac function. So things that can increase your cardiac output: faster heart rate, you're pushing out more blood. More volume, you're pushing out more volume. Greater contractility, the stronger it's going to beat out. When Hannah was fighting that saber-toothed tiger, or that saber-toothed whisker, her heart rate sped up, delivering more oxygen to the body, right? To the muscles, because that's what she was going to need to help with. Lower diastolic pressure, it's less pressure against the arterial walls, so the better the beat out. Decreasing, just basically take the opposite of what we just did. Low heart rate, low contractility, low preload, higher blood pressure. So a way that we can maintain cardiac output is by systemic vascular resistance. In some places, the brain, the body has to work against gravity, right? Blood has to go up when gravity says stuff goes down. And so what happens is the blood vessels get smaller. Blood vessels get smaller. And so what's happening to that resistance or the pressure against the arterial walls? Yeah. Ramon, you said it. It's going up. If the blood vessels get bigger, what had just happened to that resistance?
It went down.
It went down. And as a result, what happens to your blood pressure? Goes down because there's less resistance. Your heart doesn't have to work as hard. All right. I'm going to put it on the chat so you guys can see it and write it down. It's called, actually, what they call it now is the Frank-Starling law. The greater the stretch, the greater the force of the contraction. Frank-Starling's law, or Frank-Starling law. The greater the stretch, the greater the force of the contraction. In other words, remember that blood vessel being constricted? So in order to push the blood through, remember afterload? So the more the heart has to push against that resistance, the harder the heart is going to have to contract to push that blood through that narrowed opening. So in this picture you see, let's flow the blood from right to left. Does the heart have to work really hard to push that blood through that smaller opening? Yes, it does. And that's what Frank-Starling's law says. The greater the stretch, the greater the force of the contraction. The more it has to push against that wall, the harder the heart's going to have to work. Whereas if it's going right to left, how much stretch is there? How much resistance is there?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. So how hard does the heart have to work now?
Doesn't.
Not very hard.
It doesn't. And so this concept comes into play when, for example, the patient is bleeding out. As the patient is losing volume, what happens to the stretch? What happens to that stretch? Jacob, what happens to that stretch? There's three options: up, down, or remains the same.
It go down.
It goes down. As a result, what happens to your blood pressure?
It goes up.
Now, if the stretch is going down, then the blood pressure goes
down as well.
Yeah, it goes down as well. Because that's what Frank-Starling's law is. If there's a lot of resistance, the pressure is going to be higher. If there's not a lot of resistance, then the pressure is going to go down. Okay. questions on that concept? Are you guys doing okay? Is anybody stuck, not really comprehending a topic? Please speak up. Please speak up. Okay. So microcirculation, all it has to deal with is the arterioles, the capillaries, and the venules. So on the left, we have the artery. We know that the blood flows from an artery into an arteriole, and then into the capillaries, or through the capillaries, and then into the venules, and finally the veins. That's a path, regardless, whether it's in the lungs or in the tissue. Artery, arterial, capillary, venules, veins. Now, at the entrance of the capillaries, there's little muscles. And those little muscles are called precapillary sphincters. In other words, they control the blood flow into the capillaries. Now, why are those precapillary sphincters important? Part of it is one of my Lewisms. The body's going to do what it can to take care of itself. So in pathophysiology, as the body is going out of homeostasis, it needs to protect the most important structures, organs. What are the two most important organs in order?
Brain and heart.
Brain and heart.
The brain and the heart. Okay. The skin, actually, before I get there. So what it does is it shunts off blood flow to unimportant areas. In other words, those precapillary sphincters close off, and so now this blood flow, as it's coming down, it's like, whoa, it's closed. Oh, it's closed. And it keeps going until it finds an open capillary. Again, for sure, you'll find it in the brain and in the heart. Where you find the shunting, first off, it occurs in the skin. Now, it happens a little bit later on. It doesn't happen immediately later on, but it's still going to divert blood flow from unimportant organs. You know the most unimportant organ to the body? Although for some of you, it's like really important. You have skincare, right? You wash your face, you put all this anti-acne stuff, you take care of it. You know, you put anti-aging cream. Yes, Gabe, I'm talking about you. The blackhead removers, you got the masks that you put on at night. But the body overall doesn't care. And so it diverts blood away from the skin. The skin is kind of like, okay, I'm here to help out. You tell me what you need. So it's not getting blood flow. As a result, the skin becomes pale, cool, and diaphoretic or sweaty. The skin color becomes pale, whiter than the whitest person in this class right now. Their skin temperature becomes cool. Why is the temperature becoming cooler? Let's see if you guys were paying attention earlier.
There's no energy being created.
There's a little bit of energy being created, but the concept is correct. We don't have enough energy being created. We have little heat being produced. So the skin temperature decreases. And then sweaty, it does. Okay. So that's what shunting is all about. This in pathophysiology is important to understand why you're going to have the patient the way that you're seeing them. Because the body's trying to take care of the more important organs, the unimportant organs, the skin is not getting enough blood flow. Therefore, it's not creating a lot of energy. That makes sense. I'm only seeing one person nodding their head. 2 people, 3 people. We already know it's going to make sense to Ray, so.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Of course. As the body's trying to take care of itself, it's going to close off the capillaries in certain areas. The least important organ to the body is the skin. So because those capillaries are closed off via the precapillary sphincters, the skin is not getting adequate perfusion. So as a result, there is minimal energy production. Therefore, the skin is going to become pale, cool, and clammy, or diaphoretic, whatever you want to use. Common term is sweaty, pale, cool, and sweaty. Was that okay?
That makes sense now.
All right. I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody behind.
You left me in the last chapter, Lou.
Huh?
You left me back in chapter 7, part 1.
Get to it. Ask Eric for help. Tell him I won't approve any more of his write-outs until he helps you. You too, Vanessa.
Hey,
what?
I did not say you left me back at chapter 7. You left me back at like chapter 5. So that's a whole nother conversation.
5, that was communication. That was easy.
Not for her.
Are you saying she doesn't communicate well? Was that a sexist remark?
No, it's because she's a chief. It's not because she's a woman. It's because she's a chief.
I'll be sure to send you the downloaded version of this recording.
I'm just going to say I'm going to send him to HR.
Don't share the video. All right. So again, with cardiac output, is determined how? How do we determine cardiac output?
Heart rate times stroke volume.
Heart rate times stroke volume. So if we increase the heart rate, what happens to your cardiac output?
Goes up.
What if we decrease the stroke volume?
Decreases.
Okay. And then inversely, if we increase the stroke volume, decrease the cardiac output. I'm sorry, increase the stroke volume, decrease the heart rate. What happens to the stroke volume or cardiac output?
Decreases.
It decreases.
Decreases.
So we can have changes in one or the other, and we can have an increase or a decrease. It all depends. All right. So blood pressure is used to maintain good perfusion because with the heart working adequately, nice and strong pumps, we're able to get oxygen all the way around the body. If we don't have enough energy behind that contraction, then what happens to that perfusion? It goes down, right? Because is all the body going to be receiving that oxygen? No. And so because part of the body is not getting enough oxygen, what do you think the body's going to do?
Compensate.
Okay. Compensate. Oh, that's more of a shock term, but you're right. It's going to compensate. It's going to take care of itself, right? And how is it going to compensate? How is it going to take care of itself?
It's going to shunt off blood to only the necessary parts.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, if for whatever reason blood pressure starts to drop, there are receptors. What are those receptors called?
Baroreceptors.
Baroreceptors. So remember with chemoreceptors, you got to think about chemicals in the blood. Baroreceptors, think about bariatric pressure or barometric pressure. I'm sorry, barometric pressure. So baro means pressure. So baroreceptors deal with the pressure. So if those receptors detect a decrease in the pressure, what are those receptors going to tell the brain? Here's my blood vessel. It's going to what?
To increase or decrease?
Okay. So if the pressure is dropping, my blood vessels, what do you think they're going to do? Increase or decrease?
Increase the heart rate.
Okay, increases the heart rate, but I want to know about the blood vessels.
It's going to constrict.
They're going to constrict.
Constrict. Yeah.
And why? What is the purpose behind constricting the blood vessels?
Get more pressure.
To regulate the blood pressure.
Remember the resistance we were talking about? As a result, the systemic vascular resistance is going to increase because now the blood vessels have gotten smaller. And according to Starling's law, what's going to happen?
More pressure means there's more elasticity.
Okay, but that's not Starling's law.
Is it the equal resistance?
No. What do you mean equal?
It generates a forceful contraction.
Why? You're right.
So it's enough to eject it.
Okay. What I'm getting at, what I was trying to get at you guys is, remember, the greater the stretch, the greater the force of the contraction. So by the increased resistance, the harder the heart's going to have to work to go against that resistance. So that blood pressure is going to increase. Okay. So with the decrease in oxygen in the blood, and what receptors detect that?
Chemo.
The chemoreceptors. They're also detecting a rise in what?
Carbon dioxide.
In carbon dioxide. So heart rate's going to increase to try to get available oxygen to where it needs to go, but also get that carbon dioxide into the lungs to get rid of it faster. And so what happens to your respiratory rate?
It increases.
It also increases. So we just learned a lot of this big concept that applies to a lot of things that we're going to be talking about in the future. When something is inhibiting perfusion, whatever reason, medical or trauma, you're going to have an increase in the pulse rate. You're going to have an increase in the respiratory rate, and your blood pressure should stay the same or go up a little bit as a result of that increased systemic vascular resistance. That's normal as a result of the body trying to take care of itself, or as somebody keeps saying, compensation. The body's compensating for what it's ailing it, making it not be normal. All right, although I think I got to close the outside door.
Well, yeah.
So, all right, sounds good. Thank you, man. You too, drive safe. So again, I'm excited because this is going to follow us as we progress in the book. You're going to see that whenever something is affecting perfusion, blood loss, trauma to the chest for being a smartass. Vanessa, you weren't here, but you had a chance to punch Gabe in the ribs.
Sir, I don't need a chance to punch Gabe in the ribs. I can do it when I see him every Wednesday at training or some other time.
There you go. Although Brisa's the one that did it today. She had fun.
And a wonderful job too. She could do it again too.
Oh, I'll give her another opportunity. Don't worry. So anyway, again, I'm excited because this is a huge concept that we're going to be able to do later on. So if you need help with it, then please let me know. All right. So that's just the review, which I hope you guys did, or you guys understand. Please, 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 and I'll tell you guys this, so in case you're shy, if you have questions on this chapter, email them to me and I will answer them. Or just send me a text and say, Lou, can you get on Teams and we can chat about it some more. Okay. So to finish it off, so the patient has a history of chronic obstructive lung disease, or COPD, and heart failure. This sucks. He has been increasingly short of breath for 2 days now, worsening today. So he might have fluid buildup in his lungs because of that congestive heart failure, or CHF. With the assistance of an engine crew, Brisa and Gabe continue assisting the patient's ventilations and providing supplemental O2. The crew recognizes the seriousness of the patient's condition and is prepared to take further measures if needed to maintain the patient's airway. Gabe calls in a report to the receiving hospital. When they arrive at the ED, a physician, nurse, and respiratory therapist are waiting to continue the patient's care. With a heart failure, we'll find out in chapter 17. Remember we talked about the left side of the heart pushing blood out to the body?
Mm-hmm.
With age and with disease, but with age, the left side starts becoming weaker. It's not able to push blood out as adequately as it used to. So we start having a buildup of fluid into the lungs. Understand that we're not Aquaman. So we cannot diffuse oxygen through fluid. In other words, oxygen's here, fluid's here, it can't get through to the alveoli. So the person is literally drowning because they can't get enough oxygen to the lungs. So this patient is having a hard time breathing. And that's what happened to my dad when he had his heart attack. The left side of his heart failed, so he had a buildup of fluid in his lungs that caused him to not be able to catch his breath. He was drowning. So they ended up intubating him to help him breathe. And a couple of days later, they got the excess fluid out of his lungs. So they ended up taking like 6 liters of fluid from his lungs.
It's a lot.
Yeah. That's why he was intubated in ICU for 4 days.
They just diuresed him.
No, actually, they ended up doing dialysis.
Oh, his kidneys gave out?
He had renal failure. Not as bad though. They were getting bad, but they fucked him up at the hospital, and yeah, he ended up.
They messed up his kidney function.